Hello, everyone. Next up is the story of Dr. Dolittle. And if you were here last week, you'll probably remember this doll. This is Dr. Dolittle from the movie in 1964, 5, somewhere around there. Anyway, Dr. Dolittle was played by an actor by the name of Rex Harrison. And this doll used to talk. And you would pull this string and he would actually sing, because the 1960s movie of Dr. Dolittle was a musical. And one of my favorite songs as a little kid was Talk to the Animals, which he would sing when you pulled this little string. And I had this doll, and I also had a Push Me Pull You, which is I'm not going to tell you. Because as we read more chapters, you're going to find out what a push me pull you is. So you're going to have to come back, not today, but another day, and hear what a push me pull you is. Today, though, we're going to meet some new animals, and we're going to go to Africa. So we're going to read chapters 3, 4, and 5 of the story of Dr. Dolittle. See you in a minute. Hello, everyone. We are going to pick up where we left off with the story of Dr. Dolittle. If you remember last, we had a very interesting story with the poor doctor who had too many animals, so the patient stopped coming to see him. And then his bird, Polynesia, taught him animal language, and he started speaking to the animals, and all of a sudden he became a vet instead of a people doctor. So we are actually picking up where we left off. And we are going to read chapter 3, 4, and 5. Chapter 3 is More Money Troubles. And soon, now, the doctor began to make money again. And his sister Sarah bought a new dress and was very happy. Some of the animals who came to see him were so sick that they had to stay at the doctor's house for a week. And when they were getting better, they used to sit on the chairs and the lawn. And often, even after they got well, they did not want to go away. They liked the doctor and his house so very much, and he never had the heart to refuse them when they asked if they could stay. So in this way, he went on getting more and more pets. Once he was sitting on his garden wall, smoking a pipe in the evening. An Italian organ grinder came around with a monkey on a string. The doctor saw at once that the monkey's collar was way too tight and that he was dirty and very unhappy. So he took the monkey away from the Italian man and gave him a shilling and told him to go away. The organ grinder got awfully angry and said that he wanted to keep that monkey. But the doctor told him that if he did not go away, he would punch him in the nose. John Dolittle was a very strong man, but he was not very tall. So the Italian went away saying rude things about the monkey and that the monkey stayed with Dr. Dolittle. But the monkey had a good home. The other animals in the house called the monkey Chi-Chi, which in common monkey language meant ginger. And another time, when the circus came to Puddleby, the crocodile, who had a very, very bad toothache, escaped at night and came into the doctor's garden. The doctor talked him in crocodile language, but when the crocodile saw what a nice house it was with all the different places for the different kinds of animals, he too wanted to live with the doctor. He asked if he could not sleep in the fish pond at the bottom of the garden, if he promised not to eat any of the fish. When the circus man came to take him back, he got so wild and savage that he frightened him away. But to everyone else in the house, he was always as gentle as a kitten. But now the old ladies grew afraid to send their lapdogs to Dr. Dolittle because of the crocodile. And the farmers would not believe that he would not eat the lambs and the sick calves they brought to be cured. So the doctor went to the crocodile and told him he must go back to the circus. But he wept such big tears and begged so hard to be allowed to stay that the doctor did not have the heart to turn him out. So then the doctor's sister came to him and said, "John, you must send that creature away. Now the farmers and the old ladies are afraid to send their animals to you, just as we were beginning to be well off again. Now we will be ruined entirely. This is the last straw. I will no longer be housekeeper for you if you do not send away that alligator." "It isn't an alligator," said the doctor. "It's a crocodile." "I don't care what you call it," said his sister. "It's a nasty thing to find under the bed. I won't have it in the house." "But he has promised me," said the doctor, "that he will not bite anyone. He does not like the circus, and I have not the money to send him back to Africa, where he comes from. He minds his own business, and his whole is very well behaved. Don't be so fussy." "I tell you, I will not have him around," said Sarah. "He eats the linoleum. If you do not send him away this very minute, I'll go get married." "All right," said the doctor. "Go get married. It cannot be helped." And he took down his hat and went out into the garden. So Sarah Dolittle packed up her things and went off. The doctor was left all alone with his animal family. And very soon he was poorer than he had ever been before, with all these mouths to fill and the house to look after and no one to do the mending and no money coming in to pay the butcher's bill. Things began to look very, very difficult, but the doctor did not worry at all. "Money is a nuisance," he used to say. "We'd all be much better off if it had never been invented. What does money matter, so long as we're happy?" But soon the animals themselves began to get worried. And one evening, when the doctor was asleep in his chair before the kitchen fire, they began talking it over amongst themselves in whispers. And the owl Tutu, who was good at arithmetic, figured it out that there was only money enough left for another week, if they had only one meal per day. Then the parrot said, "I think we're all ought to do our housework ourselves. At least we can do that much. After all, it's our sakes that this old man finds himself so lonely and so poor." So it was agreed that the monkey Chi-Chi was to do the cooking and the mending, that the dog was to sweep the floors, the duck was to dust and make the beds, and the owl Tutu was to keep the accounts, and the pig was to do the gardening. They made Polynesia, the parrot, the housekeeper and laundress because she was the oldest. Of course, at first, they all found their new jobs very, very hard to do, all except Chi-Chi, who had hands and could do things like a man. But they soon got used to it, and they used to think it great fun to watch Jip, the dog, sweeping his tail over the floor with a rag tied onto it for a broom. After a little while, they got to do the housework so well that the doctor said he had never seen the house kept so tidy and so clean before. In this way, things went along for right a long while, but without money, they still found it very hard. Then the animals made a vegetable and flower stall outside the garden gate, and they sold radishes and roses to people that passed by on the road. But they still did not seem to make enough money to pay all of the bills, and still the doctor would not worry. When the parrot came to him and told him that the fishmonger would no longer sell them any fish, he said, "Oh, never mind. So long as the hens lay eggs and the cow gives milk, we have omelets and junket. And there are plenty of vegetables left in the garden. The winter is still a long way off. Don't fuss." That was the trouble with Sarah. She would fuss. I wonder how Sarah's getting on. An excellent woman, some ways. Well. But the snow came earlier than usual that year, and although the old lame horse hauled in plenty of wood from the forest outside the town, so they could have a big fire in the kitchen, most of the vegetables in the garden were gone, and the rest were covered with snow. And many of the animals were hungry. The 4th chapter, a message from Africa. That winter was a very, very cold one. And one night in December, when they were all sitting around the warm fire in the kitchen, and the doctor was reading aloud to them out of the books he had written himself in animal language, the owl Tutu suddenly said, "Oh, shush, the noise outside." They all listened, and presently they heard someone running. The door flew open, and the monkey Chi-Chi ran in, badly out of breath. Doctor, he cried. I got a message from a cousin of mine in Africa. There are terrible sickness among the monkeys out there. They are all catching it. They are all dying in hundreds. They all heard of you and beg you to come to Africa to stop the sickness." "Who brought this message?" asked the doctor, taking off his spectacles and laying down the book. "A swallow," said Chi-Chi. She's outside. She's outside in the rain, but..." "Bring her by the fire," said the doctor. "She must be not perished in the cold. The swallows flew south 6 months ago." So the swallow was brought in and huddled all shivering, and although she was a little afraid at first, she soon got warmed up and sat on the edge of the mantelpiece and began to talk. When she had finished, the doctor said, "I would gladly go to Africa, especially in this bitter weather, but I'm afraid we haven't any money enough to buy the tickets. Go get me the money box, Chi-Chi." So the monkey climbed up and got it off the top shelf of the dresser. There was nothing in it, not one single penny. "I felt sure there was 2 pence, said the doctor. "There was," said the owl, "but you spent it on a rattle for the badger's baby when he was teething." "Did I?" said the doctor. Dear me. What a nuisance money is, to be sure. Well, never mind. Perhaps I'll go down to the seaside. I shall be able to borrow a boat. That'll take us to Africa. I knew a seaman once who brought me his baby with the measles. Maybe he'll lend me his boat. This baby got well." So early the next morning, the doctor went down to the seashore. When he came back, he told the animals it was all right. The sailor was going to lend them his boat. Then the crocodile and the monkey and the parrot were very, very glad and began to sing because they were going back to Africa, their real home. And the doctor said, "Oh, I shall only be able to take you 3, with Jib the dog, Dab the duck, Gub the pig, and the owl Tutu. The rest of the animals, like the dormice and the water voles and the bats, they'll have to go back and live in the fields where they were born till we come home again. But most of them sleep through the winter, so they won't mind. And besides, it wouldn't be good for them to go to Africa. So then the parrot, who had been on long sea voyages before, began telling the doctor all the things he would have to take with him on the ship. "You must have plenty of pilot bread," she said. "Hardtack, they call it. And you must have beef in cans and an anchor." "Oh, I expect the ship will have its own anchor," said the doctor. "Well, make sure, said Polynesia, "because it's very important. You can't stop if you haven't got an anchor. You'll need a bell." "What's that for?" asked the doctor. "To tell time by," said the parrot. "You go and ring it every half hour, and then you talk, you know what time it is, and bring a whole lot of rope. It always comes in handy on voyages, Then they began to wonder where they were going to get the money to buy all the things they needed. "Oh, bother it! Money again," cried the doctor. "Goodness, I shall be glad to get to Africa where we don't have to have any. I'll go and ask the grocer, and he will, if he can wait for his money till I get back." No, I will send the sailor to ask him." So the sailor went to the grocer, and presently he came back with all the things they wanted. Then the animals packed up, and after they had turned off the water so that the pipes wouldn't freeze and put up the shutters, they closed the house and gave the key to the old horse who lived in the stable. And when they had seen that there was plenty of hay in the loft to last the horse through the winter, they carried all their luggage down to the seashore and got on the boat. The cat's meat man was there to see them off, and he brought a large suet pudding as a present for the doctor, because he said he had been told you couldn't get suet puddings in the foreign lands. As soon as they were on the ship, Gub-Gub, the pig, asked where the beds were, for it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he wanted his nap. So Polynesia took him downstairs to the inside of the ship and showed him the beds, set all on top of one another, like bookshelves against a wall, like the bookshelves behind me. "Why, that isn't a bed," cried Gub-Gub. "That's a shelf." "Beds are always on those like that on ships," said the parrot. "It isn't a shelf. Climb up into it and go to sleep, That's what you call a bunk." "I don't think I'll go to bed yet," said Gub-Gub. "I'm too excited. I want to go upstairs again and see them start." "Well, this is your first trip," said Polynesia. "You'll get used to the life after a while." And she went back up to the stairs on the ship, humming a song to herself. "I've been the Black Sea and the Red Sea. I rounded the Isle of Wight. I discovered the Yellow River and the Orange too by night. Now Greenland drops behind again, and I sail the ocean blue. I'm tired of all these colors, Jane. I'm coming back to you." They were just going to start on their journey when the doctor said he would have to go back and ask the sailor which way to Africa. But the swallow said he had been to that country many times and would show them the way to get there. So the doctor told Chi-Chi to pull up the anchor, and the voyage began. The 5th chapter, The Great Journey. Now for 6 whole weeks, they went sailing on and on over the rolling seas, following the swallow who flew before the ship to show them the way. At night, she carried a tiny little lantern so they should not miss her in the dark, and the people on the other ships that passed said that the light must be a shooting star. As they sailed further and further into the south, it got warmer and warmer. Polynesia, Chi-Chi, and the crocodile enjoyed the hot sun to no end. They ran about laughing and looking over the side of the ship to see if they could see Africa yet. But the pig and the dog and the owl Tutu could do nothing in such weather, but they sat at the end of the ship in the shade of a barrel with their tongues hanging out and drinking lemonade. Dab Dab the duck used to keep herself cool by jumping into the sea and swimming behind the ship. And every once in a while, when the top of her head grew way too hot, she would dive under the ship and come up the other side. In this way, too, she used to catch herrings on Tuesdays and Fridays when everybody on the boat ate fish to make the beef last longer. When they got near to the equator, they saw some flying fishes coming toward them, and the fishes asked the parrot if this was Dr. Dolittle's ship. When she told them that it was, they said that they were glad because the monkeys in Africa were getting very, very worried and that he would never come. Polynesia asked them how many miles they had yet to go, and the flying fishes said it was only 55 miles now to the coast of Africa. And another time, a whole school of porpoises came dancing through the waves, and they too asked Polynesia if this was the ship of the famous doctor. And when they heard that it was, they asked the parrot if the doctor wanted anything for his journey. And Polynesia said, "Yes, we have run short of onions, pork." "There's an island not far from here," said the porpoises, "where the old wild onions grow tall and strong. Keep straight on, and we will get some and catch them up to you." So the porpoises dashed away through the sea, and very soon the parrot saw them again, coming up behind, dragging the onions through the waves in big nets made of seaweed. The next evening, as the sun was going down, the doctor said, "Get me the telescope, Chi-Chi. Our journey is nearly ended. Very soon we should be able to see the shores of Africa." And about a half an hour later, sure enough, they thought they could see something in front that might be land, but it began to get darker and darker, and they couldn't be sure. Then a great storm came up with thunder and lightning, and the wind howled, whoosh. The rain came down in torrents, and the waves got so high they splashed right over the boat. Presently, there was a big bang. The ship stopped and rolled over on its side. "What's happened?" asked the doctor, coming up from downstairs. "Oh, I'm not sure," said the parrot, "but I think we're shipwrecked. Tell the duck to get out and see, Bob." So Dab Dab dived right under the waves, and when she came up, she said they had struck a rock. There was a big hole at the bottom of the ship. The water was coming in, and they were sinking fast. "We must have run into Africa," said the doctor. Dear me, well, we must swim to land." But Chi-Chi and Gub-Gub did not know how to swim. "Get the rope," said Polynesia. "I told you it would come in handy. Oh, where's the duck? Come here, Dab Dab. Take this end of the rope. Fly to the shore and tie it on a palm tree. And we'll hold the other end at the ship here. Then those that can't swim must climb the rope till they reach the land. That's what you call a lifeline. So they all got safely to the shore, some swimming, some flying, and those that climbed along the rope brought the doctor's trunk and handbag with them. But the ship was no good anymore, with the big hole in the bottom, and presently the rough sea beat it to pieces on the rocks, and the timbers floated away. Then they all took shelter in a very nice dry cave until they found high up on the cliffs till the storm was over. When the sun came out the next morning, they went down to the sandy beach to dry themselves. "Dear old Africa," sighed Polynesia. It's good to get back. Just think, it'll be 169 years tomorrow since I was here. Ah, and it hasn't changed a bit. Same old palm tree, same old red earth, all same old black ants. There's no place like home. And the others noticed she had tears in her eyes. She was so pleased to see the country once again. Then the doctor missed his high hat, for it had been blown into the sea during the storm. So Dab Dab went out to look for it, and presently she saw it, a long way off, floating on the water like a toy boat. When she flew down to get it, she found one of the white mice, very frightened, sitting inside it. "What are you doing there?" asked the duck. "You are told to stay behind in Puddleby." "I didn't want to be left behind," said the mouse. "I wanted to see Africa was like. I have relatives there, so I hid in the baggage and was brought on the ship with that hard tack. When the ship sank, I was terribly frightened because I can't swim far. I swam as long as I could, but as soon I got all exhausted and thought I was going to sink. And then, just at that moment, the old man's hat came floating by, and I got into it because I didn't want to be drowned." So the duck took up the hat with the mouse in it and brought it to the doctor on the shore, and they all gathered round to have a look. "That's what you call a stowaway," said the parrot. Presently, when they were looking for a place in the trunk where the white mouse could travel comfortably, the monkey Chi-Chi suddenly said, "Shh! I hear footsteps in the jungle." They all stopped talking and listened, and soon a man came down out of the woods and asked them what they were doing there. "My name is John Dolittle, MD," said the doctor. I've been asked to come to Africa to cure the monkeys who are sick." "You must all come before the king," said the man. "What king?" asked the doctor, who didn't waste any time. "The king of Jolinki," said the man. "All the lands here belong to him, and all the strangers must be brought before him. Follow me." So they gathered up their baggage and went off, following the man through the jungle. And that's where we're going to leave off today.
White Fang by Jack London. Chapter 1, The Trail of the Meat. Dark spruce forest frowned on either side of the frozen waterway. The trees had been stripped by a recent wind of their white covering of frost, and they seemed to lean towards each other, black and ominous in the fading light. A vast silence reigned over the land. The land itself was a desolation, lifeless, without movement, so lone and cold that the spirit of it was not even that of sadness. There was a hint in it of laughter, but of a laughter more terrible than any sadness, a laughter that was mirthless as the smile of the Sphinx, a laughter cold as the frost and partaking of the grimness of infallibility. It was the masterful and incommunicable wisdom of eternity, laughing at the futility of life and the effort of life. It was the wild, the savage, frozen-hearted Northland wild. But there was life abroad in the land and defiant. Down the frozen waterway toiled a string of wolfish dogs. Their bristly fur was rimed with frost. Their breath froze in the air as it left their mouths, spouting forth in spumes of vapor that settled upon the hair of their bodies and formed into crystals of frost. Leather harness was on the dogs, and leather traces attached to them to a sled, which dragged along behind. The sled was without runners. It was made of stout birch bark, and its full surface rested on the snow. The front end of the sled was turned up like a scroll, in order to force down and under the bore of soft snow that surged like a wave before it. On the sled, securely lashed, was a long, narrow, oblong box. There were other things on the sled, blankets, an axe, and a coffee pot and frying pan, but prominent, occupying most of the space, was the long, narrow, oblong box. In advance of the dogs, on wide snowshoes, toiled a man. At the rear of the sled toiled a second man. On the sled in the box lay a third man whose toil was over, a man whom the wild had conquered and beaten down until he would never more nor struggle again. It is not the way of the wild to like movement. Life is an offense to it, for life is movement, and the wild aims and always to destroy movement. It freezes the water to prevent it running to the sea. It drives the sap out of the trees till they are frozen to their mighty hearts. And most ferociously and terribly of all does the wild harry and crush into submission man. Man, who is the most restless of life, ever in revolt against the dictum that all movement must come to the cessation of movement. But at the front and the rear, unawed and indomitable, toiled the two men who were not yet dead. Their bodies were covered with fur and soft tanned leather. Eyelashes and cheeks and lips were so coated with the crystals from their frozen breath that their faces were not discernible. This gave them the seeming of ghostly masks, undertakers in a spectral world at the funeral of some ghost. But under it all, they were men, penetrating the land of desolation and mockery and silence, puny adventurers bent on colossal adventure, pitting themselves against the might of a world as remote and alien and pulseless as the abysses of space. They traveled on without speech, saving their breath for the work of their bodies. On every side was the silence, pressing upon them with a tangible presence. It affected their minds as the many atmospheres of deep water affect the body of the diver. It crushed them with the weight of unending vastness and unalterable decree. It crushed them into the remotest recesses of their own minds, pressing out of them like juices from the grape, all the false ardors and exaltations and undue self-values of the human soul until they perceived themselves finite and small, specks and motes moving with weak cunning and little wisdom amidst the play and interplay of the great blind elements and forces. An hour went by, and a second hour. The pale light of the short sunless day was beginning to fade when a faint, far cry arose on the still air. It soared upward with a swift rush till it reached its topmost note, where it persisted, palpitant and tense, and then slowly died away. It might have been a lost soul wailing, had it not been invested with a certain sad fierceness and hungry eagerness. The front man turns his head until his eyes met the eyes of the man behind, and then, across the narrow oblong box, each nodded to the other. A second cry arose, piercing the silence with needle-like shrillness. Both men located the sound. It was to the rear, somewhere in the snow expanse they had just traversed. A third, an answering cry arose, also to the rear and to the left of the second cry. "They're after us, Bill," said the man at the front. His voice sounded hoarse and unreal, and he had spoken with apparent effort. "Meat is scarce," answered his comrade. "I ain't seen a rabbit sign for days." Thereafter they spoke no more, though their ears were keen for the hunting cries that continued to rise behind them. At the fall of darkness, they swung the dogs into a cluster of spruce trees on the edge of the waterway and made a camp. The coffin, at the side of the fire, served for a seat and table. The wolf dogs clustered on the far side of the fire snarled and bickered among themselves, but evinced no inclination to stray off into the darkness. "Seems to me, Henry, they're staying remarkable close to the camp," Bill commented. Henry, squatting over the fire and settling the pot of coffee with a piece of ice, nodded. Nor did he speak till he had taken his seat on the coffin and begun to eat. They know where their hides is safe, he said. They'd sooner eat grub than be grub. They're pretty wise, them dogs. Bill shook his head. Oh, I don't know. His comrade looked at him curiously. First time I ever heard you say anything about their not being wise. Henry, said the other, munching with deliberation the beans he was eating. Did you happen to notice the way them dogs kicked up when I was a-feeding them? They did cut up more than usual, Henry acknowledged. How many dogs have we got, Henry? 6. Well, Henry, Bill stopped for a moment in order for his words might get greater significance. As I was saying, Henry, we've got 6 dogs. I took 6 fish out of the bag. I gave 1 fish to each dog, and Henry, I was 1 fish short. You counted wrong. We've got 6 dogs, the other reiterated dispassionately. I took out 6 fish. 1 ear didn't get no fish. I came back to the bag afterward and got him his fish. We've only got 6 dogs, Henry said. Henry, Bill went on, I won't say they was all dogs, but there was 7 of them that got fish. Henry stopped eating to glance across the fire and count the dogs. There's only 6 now, he said. I saw the other one run across the snow, Bill announced with cool positiveness. I saw 7. Henry looked at him commiseratingly and said, I'll be almighty glad when this trip's over. What do you mean by that? Bill demanded. I mean that this load of iron is getting on your nerves and that you're beginning to see things. I thought of that, Bill answered gravely, and so when I saw it run off across the snow, I looked in the snow and saw its tracks. Then I counted the dogs, and there were still 6 of them. The tracks is there in the snow now. Do you want to look at them? I'll show them to you. Henry did not reply, but munched on in silence until the meal finished. He topped it with a final cup of coffee. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and said, Then you're thinking, as it was, a long, wailing cry, fiercely sad from somewhere in the darkness, had interrupted him. He stopped to listen to it. Then he finished his sentence with a wave of his hand toward the sound of the cry. One of them? Bill nodded. I'd a blame a sight sooner think that than anything else. You notice yourself the row the dogs made. Cry after cry and answering cries were turning the silence into a bedlam. From every side, the cries arose, and the dogs betrayed their fear by huddling together so close to the fire that their hair was scorched by the heat. Bill threw on more wood before lighting his pipe. I'm thinking you're down in the mouth some, Henry said. Henry, he sucked meditatively at his pipe for some time before he went on. Henry, I was a-thinking, what a blame sight luckier he is than you and me'll ever be. He indicated the third person by a downward thrust of the thumb to the box on which he sat. You and me, Henry, when we die, we'll be lucky if we get enough stones over our carcasses to keep the dogs off of us. But we ain't got people and money and all the rest like him, Henry rejoined. Long-distance funerals is something you and me can't exactly afford. What gets me, Henry, is what a chap like this, that's a lord or something in his own country and that's never had to bother about grub nor blankets, why he comes a-butting around the godforsaken ends of the earth. That's what I can't exactly see. He might have lived to a ripe old age if he'd stayed at home, Henry agreed. Bill opened his mouth to speak, but changed his mind. Instead, he pointed towards the wall of darkness that pressed about them from every side. There was no suggestion of form in the utter blackness. Only could be seen a pair of eyes gleaming like live coals. Henry indicated with his head, a second pair, and the third, a circle of gleaming eyes had drawn about their camp. Now and again, a pair of eyes moved or disappeared or appeared again a moment later. The unrest of the dogs had been increasing, and they stampeded in a surge of sudden fear to the near side of the fire, cringing and crawling about their legs of the men. In the scramble, one of the dogs had been overturned on the edge of the fire and had yelped with pain and fright as the smell of its singed coat possessed the air. The commotion caused the circle of eyes to shift restlessly for a moment and even to withdraw a bit, but it settled down again as the dogs became quiet. "Henry, it's a blame misfortune to be out of ammunition." Bill had finished his pipe and was helping his companion to spread the bed of fur and blanket upon the spruce boughs which he had laid over the snow before supper. Henry grunted and began unlacing his moccasins. "How many cartridges did you say you have left?" he asked. "3," came the answer. "And I wish 'twas 300. Then I'd show 'em what for, damn 'em." He shook his fist angrily at the gleaming eyes and began securely to prop his moccasins before the fire. "And I wish this cold snap break," he went on. "It's been 50 below for 2 weeks now, and I wished I'd never started on this trip, Henry. I don't like the looks of it. I don't feel right somehow. And while I'm wishing, I wish the trip was over and done with, and you and me sitting by the fire at Fort McGurry just about now and playing cribbage. That's what I wished." Henry grunted and crawled into bed. As he dozed off, he was aroused by his comrade's voice. "Say, Henry, that other one that come and got a fish, why didn't the dogs pitch into it? That's what's bothering me." "You're bothering too much, Bill," came sleepy response. "You was never like this before. You just shut up now and go to sleep, and you'll be all hunky-dory in the morning. Your stomach's sour. That's what's bothering you." The men slept, breathing heavily, side by side, under one covering. The fire died down, and the gleaming eyes drew closer the circle they had flung about the camp. The dogs clustered together in fear, now and again snarling menacingly as a pair of eyes drew close. Once their uproar became so loud that Bill woke up. He got out of bed carefully so as not to disturb the sleep of his comrade and threw more wood on the fire. As it began to flame up, the circle of eyes drew further back. He glanced casually at the huddling dogs. He rubbed his eyes and looked at them more sharply. Then he crawled back into the blankets. "Henry," he said. "Oh, Henry." Henry groaned as he passed from sleep to waking and demanded, "What's wrong now?" "Nothing," came the answer. "Only there's 7 of them again. I just counted." Henry acknowledged receipt of the information with a grunt and slid into a snore as he drifted back into sleep. In the morning, it was Henry who awoke first and routed his companion out of bed. Daylight was yet 3 hours away. That was already 6 o'clock, and in the darkness, Henry went about preparing breakfast while Bill rolled the blankets and made the sled ready for lashing. "Say, Henry," he asked suddenly, "how many dogs did you say we had?" 6. "Wrong," Bill proclaimed triumphantly. 7 again? Henry queried. "No. 5. One's gone." "The hell," Henry cried in wrath, leaving the cooking to come and count the dogs. "You're right, Bill," he concluded. "Fatty's gone. And he went like greased lightning once he got started. Couldn't see him for smoke." "No chance at all," Henry concluded. "They just swallowed him alive. I bet he was yelping as he went down their throats, damn him." "He always was a fool dog," said Bill. "But no fool dog ought to be fool enough to go off and commit suicide that way." He looked over the remainder of the team with a speculative eye that summed up instantly the salient traits of each animal. "I bet none of the others would do it." "Couldn't drive him away from the fire with a club," Bill agreed. "I always did think there was something wrong with Fatty anyway." And this was the epitaph of a dead dog in the Northland Trail, less scant than the epitaph of many other dog, of many a man.
I hope you all had fun listening to these stories, and please come back next week to hear all the adventures. Thank you for joining us. Parents and friends, I want to remind you that NAU Theater's Story Hour is a way for us to give back to the community both locally and beyond. If you like what you see, please share our YouTube videos and please like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of our stories are in public domain and they are available on the internet. Please read along. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, keep reading.